Okay, this session is being recorded. I'm trying to share my screen with you. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So as I was saying, in anticipation of our debate, which I'm going to be looking forward to on African American English.
Yeah, honestly, I don't get it.
You don't?
Oh, I'm sorry. My sister came into my room and I accidentally unmuted.
Okay.
I get this. That's good.
That is fine. So, but first we will talk about using sources. This is very crucial because academic really discourse is the world of cited words. But definitely each discipline enforces its own rules and conventions. We do have a wide range of basically traditions. Most of you may be familiar with MLA, Modern Language Association. Now, those of you who are in social sciences, such as sociology, psychology, anthropology, linguistics, you would be familiar with APA conventions, history, and all these fields draw on what is called the Chicago style. So the emerging picture is one of basically complexity and differences that could be confusing to students. Now, you are conscious of the fact that we recommend using APA since this is a linguistics course. In reading your essays, I've come to the realization that there are some confusion, not only about these conventions themselves, but also why we use basically sources, why do we have to cite sources? And then the question of the mechanics of citing sources, how to acknowledge sources themselves, how to correctly integrate basically source material into your own text, how to document sources according to the MLA or APA conventions. These are basically definitely complex areas. Now, there is a saying in academia, it is called publish or perish. But to publish, definitely you have to really become an expert in a particular field, and you have to have read most, if not all, that has been written about a particular topic. This is a very, how should I say, intimidating, daunting, basically, task. But primarily people engage in this not only for the sake of intellectual, basically, curiosity, inquisitiveness. There are two primary incentives, which are promotion, raise. And it is interesting to note, and this has been observed in several scholarly articles, and of course, etymologically, you know that the word giving credit, why to give credit, comes from the word creed. And the underlying meaning of creed is belief. So there is an ethical, really, element to this practice. It is symbolic, basically, credit. But keep in mind that economic credit is equally important for those who are frequently or widely cited. Definitely that means basically promotion and eventually a raise. The question is really plagiarism is the lurking basically threat, whether we do it intentionally or unintentionally, it is something that may occur. So it has been defined as an acknowledged, or rather unacknowledged, use of another's words, ideas, or information. It is not just basically the words, but it could also apply, and it does apply to ideas or information, even though you put everything in your own language. Obviously, the question of originality is a very thorny question. You know, what is original? Do we have originality to begin with? And what is this big deal about basically citing sources? People may plagiarize for different reasons. It could be unfamiliarity, the complexity of these traditions, cultural and rhetorical traditions. In some cultures, it may not be as important as it is in the American or Western, basically, tradition, or it may just simply be lack of knowledge about how to integrate source material. And this could basically be either insufficient citation or inaccurate citation, not just lack of citations. So, and we always have this question, what do we have to really cite? Do we have to cite common knowledge? Do we have to cite facts, first-hand ideas and research, other people's words, other people's ideas, judgments, opinions, and arguments? What may be common knowledge to me may be something that you just found out today, or vice versa. But common knowledge is something that, you know, most people share. And there are certain facts that become a part of that common knowledge. If I tell you, you know, Sacramento is the capital of California, that is a known fact. Do I have to cite anyone? Even though I read it somewhere, I've read it in so many places. No, it is not really needed because it is common knowledge. But anything that comes from books, articles, journals, newspapers, websites, blog, comments, interviews that you conduct yourself, your citations have to appear in two places, in text and also at the end of the paper. Now, it is likely that you may confuse and confound basically these conventions. So for instance, Chicago style uses in-text citation, but everything is numbered, and then there are endnotes or footnotes, and then you have a separate basically bibliography. But in APA, as I said, you would be fine as long as you do have in-text citation and works cited at the end. So what do you have to cite? Another person's words, ideas, judgments, visual information, information attributed to an organization. And even if you wrote something, interestingly enough, you wrote something in the first paper, even though you happen to be the author, still you have to cite yourself. So this is a convention that primarily different disciplines adhere to. As a matter of fact, I did a paper on plagiarism. It was never published, and I think it is really publishable, really work. And one thing that I discovered, and this is interesting, I said that it is basically a legal, ethical issue, that lawyers are the greatest plagiarists because they work with fixed text. They borrow, they take basically text from frozen text, and they recycle them. I recall, as a matter of fact, a few years ago, I have a neighbor who lives across me, and I didn't know then that he was my neighbor. I walked into an office with one of my twin daughters. There was a small business court, basically litigation. I wanted to discuss with him. I found out that he is my neighbor. Anyway, he said he would pursue the case, and he gave me the paperwork. When I was walking out of the office and I looked at the form, there was a different name on it. I turned around and I said, excuse me, but this is not me. He said, oh, I forgot to change the name. Now, obviously, for this contract, he was only going to change the name, and he even forgot to do that. Now look at the, case of plagiarism, but obviously, lawyers basically benefit from suing and pursuing these cases. At any rate, the more vulnerable someone is, the more one would be subjected to litigation or even basically suing. So to be on the safe side, obviously, you're encouraged basically to learn these mechanics, these conventions. And the whole problem really rests in the successful integration of sources and your ability to know some fundamental academic skills that you have really been exposed to, you have practiced, meaning summarizing, paraphrasing, coding, using direct, indirect quotations. And if you use, for instance, exact quotations to give page number, even if you summarize to provide basically page number of the source from which the information is derived. So why we cite, there are multiple reasons. I would say dialogue, the demands of the discourse community, membership in a discourse community, argument strategy that could be used for counter arguments or opposing views, that could be used to establish our own ethos or authority, so that people take what we say more seriously, validity and reliability of what we are basically presenting. So definitely in working on your third paper, like the other two, you have focused, you're going to focus on a central perspective, you want to sharpen your focus, you want to identify segments in the source material that you find relevant. The context is definitely very important, the context of the text, and contextualizing and grounding your basically rhetorical analysis, whatever it may be. Now, I read somewhere, I don't recall exactly the source, paradoxically speaking, that using sources is like blowing into, I don't know if you have ever seen, charcoal buried under ashes, and then you begin to blow into it. The ashes basically are removed, and then little by little, as you blow more into the ashes, then the charcoal basically comes out. It turns into a glowing ball of fire. Now, according to this source that I read, using sources has the same role. Each time you blow into that, basically, ashes and the charcoal, it makes your point more salient, more transparent. The meaning really comes out gradually, little by little, and that is the role that sources could play in this. So connecting your source text, ideas with your topic, finding similar patterns in the sources, finding differences, and thinking about your own perspective on the issue, if they converge or diverge, and of course, conceding, challenging, refuting an important point. Now, definitely in this class, I'm sure you have noticed, maybe subjectively rather than objectively, argument structures are built on cultural, basically rhetorical norms. Are you going to be using Aristotelian or classical argument structure? Or you are going to be using a philosophical more orientation in order to build your argument? Are you going to be using Rogerian argument structure that builds is built on commonalities, building commonalities, or rhetorical situation for that purpose. So in a way, in the Western world, we have gotten used to the idea that arguments really are not critiques, but criticism, that we have to really find fault, that we have to antagonize, that we have to defeat, and dismantle someone else's ideas, rather than arriving at basically commonalities. But definitely, it is important to see the opposite's point of view, whether you want to challenge it, accommodate it, concede, or refute that point. No argument in the Western world really can be made, or anywhere in the world, without counter arguments. The whole question is, what do you do with those counter arguments? And we have seen that in the debates. So it is important to assess your own thinking about the topic, that you're ready to move forward. If you know what your perspective is, you have to evaluate the credibility and relevance of the sources. Our library provides, I don't know if you ever visit the library, I mean the virtual library, a wealth of information about these topics that I'm discussing, and eventually synthesizing the sources into your text. Now, probably you have manuals, but accessing information is easy. This is a source that I recommend, Purdue University Writing Resource. Our own library also provides rich, basically, information. So the crucial thing is you have a topic, you have facts, data, evidence, survey. You have to synthesize them so that basically you could make a credible argument. If you use multiple sources, definitely it is going to be more challenging to combine the two in agreement or in opposition. You have to really, readers have to know what the cited basically sources are and what the citing source is in this case. So, for instance, your thesis could be, you have read this particular source. O'Malley proposes that it is not really healthy and useful to have frequent exams, major exams. What he recommends is that we shouldn't really have high stake exams, but we have to have more frequent, for instance, quizzes. So definitely, if this is something that you are in agreement with or disagreement, you could definitely restate what O'Malley says and express basically your point of view, combining it with a second or a secondary source in agreement or disagreement with him. Here I do have some sources. This PowerPoint would be made available to you. And the reason is I've noticed that some of you primarily, especially when you are citing the packet, you are not citing the original source. And this is problematic. There are basically, for instance, course packet traditions of conventions that you need to abide by. I have written to quite a few of you. I've given you examples and provided you with the source. In this particular course, we are going to basically adhere to that tradition. So it is important that you check out these sources so that you accurately, both in text and in the works cited page, the source, the original source as well, it should be given recognition. So this also definitely would be the case when it comes to citing secondary sources or citing a source from a collection an edited, basically, collection of essays, such as The Language Myths, which is an edited, basically, book. So in-text citations, as you could see, and definitely, these would be very useful. At the end, I want to say that these conventions could be very confusing. I sometimes, find them confusing for myself. I have to look at an example. I have to look at the source to identify the source type, and then refer basically to these rules and examples to be able to cite correctly the source that I'm using. So I think it is important that in writing your third paper, you really learn and apply, and hopefully to be able to gain an insight into the conventions of citations, why it is important to cite, and how to cite the sources basically that we are going to be using to augment our arguments in the context of this course. Any questions?
No.
Very good. So I'll make this PowerPoint available. And by the way, I just wanted to remind you that definitely in relevance and in relation to the course content, objectives, and direction, I have uploaded, bear with me for a moment. Yes, that's not what I really want to show you. I'm trying to go back to, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Do you see this?
Yeah.
So do you speak American, learn English episode? This is really an interesting and informative episode that we may want to watch if we don't have time, which we don't. Linguistic discrimination in school. And this is definitely a very revealing story. If you're interested in the story of English, as it is called, English Black and White, this is an old documentary and it is fantastic. Despite the claim that it makes about basically the historical origin, it is only one claim. And this one, Sami Alim, Articulate While Black, is a very informative, basically, talk. For those of you who are interested in learning more about the history, the origin, the genesis of African American English, and the kinds of discriminations that they have faced as a community, definitely these videos would be enlightening. Max?
So should we go to breakout rooms?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that.